Hello everyone, I am Doc Erwin and this is Disaster, Readiness, and Risk Reduction, MELC3, Week 2, Disaster and its Effects. So this is the most essential learning competency. Describe the effects of disasters on one's life. Objectives are identify the effects of disasters to human and to the society. Determine ways to lessen the impact of a disaster. Find personal values that can help one overcome the effects of disaster. Help the community in reducing the effects of natural and man-made disaster. This is our official learners material, Disaster Readiness and Risk Reduction Pivot 4A, Self-Learning Module. So for what's in, learning task number 1. Think of 5 disasters that you had experienced, watched, or read in the past 2 years. Then write how you feel while experiencing, watching, or reading it. So you have 3 choices, no? The disaster could be what you have experienced before, or it could be something that you have watched before, or read in the past 2 years. Okay? So, dun sa isa nating activity before ay it's about 5 years. No? So this time it's only 2 years, but this time it is the one that you have experienced. Okay, so you have to write, you have to follow the table. Of course, it is found in your learner's material, okay, in your SLM, and you have to follow the template there. It's the same template presented in this PowerPoint. Okay, so calamity or disaster, you have to name them. Could be earthquake, El Nino, La Nina, typhoon, flash flood, and so on. And your feeling, how do you feel about it when there's a typhoon that cause disasters? Okay. Learning task number 2, under what's new, found on pages 14 to 15 of SLM. On the next slide are illustrations depicting expressions about COVID-19 pandemic. Read them silently and try to figure out by answering the questions given. So we have here a comic strip. Okay? So the first one said, "Di ako kasama sa social amelioration program. Paano na?" Second picture, "Sana may dumating na relief." Third picture, ECQ at lockdown. Fourth picture, maintain social distancing daw. Okay, so these are actually perhaps even before, no, na natanong nyo na to sa sarili nyo. Okay, ECQ at lockdown na naman, social distancing daw, sana may relief na dumating, di kasama sa SAP. Okay, and these are the guide questions that you have to answer. First one, what can you say about the various situations presented? And second, what troubling situations reminded you of such situations? Okay, so all of us have experienced this lockdown. Okay, the ECQ. Well, right now the NCR plus bubbles are still in the extension of the ECQ. Okay, but even before, na-experience natin to during dun sa kasagsagan ng COVID-19 last year 2020. Okay, so everyone can relate to this kind of situation. Alright, so let us talk about what is the difference between hazard and disaster. Okay, as stated, a hazard is a dangerous situation or event that carries a threat to humans. And a disaster is an event that harms humans and disrupts the operations of society. So this time, we have to analyze when is the situation a hazard and when is a situation disaster. Okay? So hazards can only be considered disasters once it affected humans. So you have to remember, there's a strong typhoon, but it only landed in an isolated island where no human being is currently living. So in that case, kahit mawasak yung buong isla, no? Kahit masira lahat ng puno doon, but walang affected na humans, then therefore, it is not considered as a disaster. It is just a hazard. Okay, so even if it is man-made or um, natural, no hazard, okay, so wala. It will not be considered as a disaster, but just a hazard. So if a disaster happened in an unpopulated area, it is still a hazard, but still it is a hazard. But it will not be classified as a disaster kapag walang naapektuhan na human population. Okay? So these are the effects of natural disasters to humans. First, displaced populations. So for example, there's a typhoon, okay? And then a certain barangay or a certain town was damaged by the typhoon. So the tendency is that the populations living on that particular area, which is greatly affected by that disaster, will be transferred to a relocation area, or it could be in an evacuation area for some time. Okay, though there are cases na you will just only evacuate for several days, but once na masira, no totally damage yung isang community, it will be very difficult to go back. Okay, so one good example there is the barangay that are closer to the Taal volcano. Yung bang barangay na nandoon na mismo sa Taal, do sa Taal volcano na mismo nakatira. Okay? So during the time na sumabog yung bulkang Taal, lahat ng barangay na nakakasakop doon sa mismong bulkan ay lumikas, di ba? Nabalitaan niyo yun, yung may mga kabayo, dala-dala nila, inilikas nila right after nung may babayong may babayong pinakang level, no? But ngayon, bawal nang pumunta doon. So, meaning to say, yung mga tao na nandoon ay tumira na sila sa other places, perhaps doon din lang malapit sa lugar na yon, but not on the exact barangay where they live before the time na hindi pa sumasabog yung Mount Taal. Okay? So that is what we call as displaced populations. So napapalipat, naililipat forcefully because of the effects of the disaster. Second is health risk. Okay, so whenever there is a disaster, there is also a risk in the health. So aside from the effects of the disaster itself, of the hazard itself, but there's also an effect. No, this is the aftermath effect. Example, may bagyo, may lindol, naapektuhan yung daloy ng tubig. Okay, so yung maduming tubig humahalo na dun sa inumin. So there's a chance na sumakit yung tiyan, magdumi sila doon, no? Mag-cause ng diarrhea. Okay? Or halimbawa naman, madami na sugatan, hindi agad nabigyan ng first aid, hindi agad nagamot. So lumala, nagkaroon ng infection. Okay? So that is the risk, health risk kapag may mga disaster. Another one is food scarcity. Okay? So kakulangan ng pagkain. So just imagine, no, tayo in the Philippines is an agricultural land. Okay? So supposedly tayo ay stable when it comes with the supply of rice, supply of vegetable, of other things na pwede nating itanim. But once na binagyo tayo, no? Wala, mapapansin niyo magmamahal yung mga supply ng yung presyo ng mga bilihin, no, yung mga vegetables, yung mga fruits, no? Biglang taas 'yan kasi kulang ng supply. So food scarcity. Now, pero yun lang yun yung binabanggit ko, hindi yun ganoon kalala. But yung malalang version niyan is that one community or one town is greatly affected by it, by a disaster, no? Nagkaroon ng disaster doon. Then the tendency is nagkaroon ng isolate yung kanilang town. Halimbawa, may gumuhong lupa, natabunan yung kalsada going to their town, so ma-isolate sila. To the point na pag naubos na yung pagkain doon sa loob ng city or ng municipality or ng town nila, what will happen? There will be food scarcity. Okay? So that's why the tendency is, no, kapag may mga disaster, mga possible disaster, pinaghahandaan talaga yan, no, ng local government or even the national government. Okay? So another one is emotional aftershocks. Okay? So there are cases na namatayan, let's say, namatayan ng asawa, ng anak, so siya na lang yung solong naiwan. Diba? So there is an emotional aftershock. No? So, gone are the days na hindi natin masyadong pinagtutuunan ng pansin yung mental health. But even in the disaster, no, nakikita na yung effects doon sa emotional stability ng tao. Okay? Now, so these are how to plan ahead of a disaster. Okay? So meaning to say na we have to plan. We have to consider the situation na there is a chance na magkaroon ng disaster doon sa ating lugar. Again, kapag nag-exist yung tatlong factors, yung tatlong risk factors. What are those again? Hazard, vulnerability, and exposure. Okay, so first step natin, check for hazards at home. So what are the possible hazards that you can see at home? Okay, so possible yung mga electrical outlets. Okay, so baka mamaya may mga naka-oscillated dyan na mga wire. Okay, so you have to check it. Or yung mga nakapatong na mga babasagin. Okay, so kasi pag nagkalindol, chances are babagsak yon. So you have to secure it. Okay, so you have to make sure na kapag may lindol, malakas ang hangin, walang babagsak kasi 'di ba? We usually do ang pinakang practice natin kapag may earthquake is duck, cover, and hold. But what will happen kapag nag-duck ka, yun namang mga trophies, yung TV nyo, malalaglag naman sa'yo. Okay? So you have to check that. And secure the positions of these things inside your house. So identify safe place indoors and outdoors. So sa loob ng bahay mo, alin ang pinaka-safe na lugar? Okay? Pag ba lumindol, pag ba nagkabagyo, alin ang pinaka-safe sa loob ng bahay nyo? Okay? And outdoors, let's say for example, you have to evacuate. Okay? So saan ka dapat dadaan na you think that it is safe? Okay? So third, educate yourself and family members. So it's not only enough that you are already educated with disaster and the steps on how to avoid or how to plan ahead of disaster. You have to educate also the family members. And it is the goal of this, one of the goals of this subject na you will be educated with DRRR and you have to educate your family members. So with that, we can be able to, we can ensure na whenever there is hazard in our community, we can avoid disaster. Okay? Next, have disaster kit supplies on hand. Okay, so what are these disaster kits? So this could be our go bag. Okay, so yung go bag natin, andun yung medical, yung ating first aid kit, may supply ka ng gamot, no? Then aside from that, you should also have your ready to eat food, yung mga instant noodles, yung mga delata. Okay? Then andun na din yung konting damit. Then andun din yung mga mahalaga yung papers like your birth certificate, marriage certificate of your parents, and so on and so forth. Passport kung meron, passbook, and so on and so forth. Yung hindi madaling kunin kapag nawala. Okay? So this go bag, no, in case that there will be disaster or possible disaster and you have to evacuate, ito lang yung hihilahin mo. Isa lang. Okay? So, para mabilis, hindi yung kung kailan andiyan, baha na daw, saka ka palang mag-aayos ng gamit mo. Okay? So, fifth, develop an emergency communication plan. Actually, it's not only about emergency communication planning, but evacuation plan dapat meron ka din. So, let's talk first about emergency communication plan. So, you have to develop a plan na kapag nagkaroon ng sudden disaster, saan kayo pupunta? Okay? What if magkaroon ng what if mawala ng signal? Kasi usually kapag may disaster, may lindol, babagsak yung mga tower ng mga cellphone site, mga cell sites, no? Bagsak, hindi ka makaka-text, hindi ka makaka-chat, hindi ka makakatawag. Okay? So you have to establish a certain plan na saan kayo makikita-kita, paano yung communication nyo, okay? Kasi pag worst come worst, di ba? In certain situation, kailangan mong i-check na paglabas nyo, possible na magkahiwa-hiwalay kayo. So saan kayo pupunta? Paano kayo magtatawagan? Alam nyo ba yung mga number ng cellphone nyo? Okay? So yun. So you have to develop such plan. Okay? And of course, the one that I said a while ago is that the family evacuation plan. Okay? So saan kayo mag-evacuate? Saan kayo pupunta whenever there is a hazard or disaster? Paano kayo makikita-kita after? Six, help your community get ready. So it's not only enough that you are educated, that your family is educated also with the disaster, but make sure that the community, the entire community is ready. Okay? So with that, we can be able to avoid any casualty. So yun ang pinakang target, no? Mapapansin nyo kapag may mga disasters sa Pilipinas or even in other countries, ang isa sa mga tinitingnan is the casualty. Ilan ang namatay. Okay? So kasi doon mo makikita yung effectivity ng preparedness. Kasi if the community is well prepared, we can be able to avoid or lessen the casualty. So kaya nga 'di ba pag sinabing evacuate, evacuate na. Pag sinabing umalis na sa lugar nyo. Okay? Kasi kaysa in the last minute saka lang sasabihin, ay aalis na pala ako, mag-evacuate na pala ako. Andiyan na pala yung tubig, malaki na, baka ako malunod. So in that case, inuuna na ng rescuer yung sarili nilang buhay. Okay? So kaya there are cases na hindi na talaga nababalikan yung supposedly nag-evacuate, okay, na hindi nakinig in the first place. And number 7, practice the disaster preparedness cycle. Okay, so we will be talking more about that preparedness cycle sa mga susunod natin na lesson. Okay, so this is another task, learning task, which is what's more. Okay, so there's a situation here. If you are a friend to a person in the situation below, what will you tell him? So what is the situation? This is the situation. So Dale Mark is a 16 years old student. He, together with his family, is currently staying in a basketball court which served as the evacuation center for the affected families who lost their homes due to the eruption of the volcano. He decided to stop schooling and instead find a job to be able to help his parents for the basic needs. So if you are a friend to a person, if you are a friend of Dale Mark, okay, halos kaedada nyo lang in the situation, and that is the situation, what will you tell him? Okay, so yeah, so you have to write your answer on your active answer sheets. Now, after learning all these things na pinag-usapan natin, no? So, knowing that a disaster disturbs the usual pattern of life and can cause both physical and emotional harm among people, how would you ensure that you are prepared to face the possible effects of any disaster that you may encounter in life? Okay? So, this is, you are being asked about this one. Okay? So, do you have any preparedness plan? Do you have any plan? So, what are the things that you have? What have you learned? Okay? That will allow you to survive in case that you will encounter any possible disaster. And for the last activity, what I can do. So this is the situation. So suppose you have watched a true-to-life story featured on a television, on a journal. So it could be on your paper, okay? On your journal or on your paper, compose a letter addressed to Ate Charing. So this is an imitation of the MMK, Ate Charo, a TV program host. So your letter should narrate how the main characters in the story inspired you with everything that he or she went through in the process on how he or she survived over the challenges of the disaster that she or he had experienced. Make sure that emphasis will be given on the disaster effects to the life of the main character. So this is found on page 17 of your SLM. So do not worry about the content of the entire PowerPoint or the entire video lesson, because these are all found on your SLM. So I'm just here to clarify, to discuss some facts, some things that perhaps you find it difficult to understand. Okay? So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening for this MELC3 week 2 of DRRR. See you again on our next video lesson. Keep safe.